Hello, I'm Marilyn Hemingway, and welcome to A Gathering Place. I said, I'm stepping back because we have young voices who want to be heard and they're moving on something.
Branding is really important to you and your business.
Even a basic type of technology, you learn it all.
And people are
Good question. Good afternoon and welcome to A Gathering Place. My name is Marilyn Hemingway and this is our semi-weekly show hosted by the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. And behind me, you've probably seen some crew from the public broadcasting station system. Yes. So they're checking us out today, folks, and I'm excited to be here and to be here with them because that's a check off my bucket list. I'm on PBS. Well, I will be. All right, so we're being taped, folks, and that's why you're seeing them behind us. We're really excited to have them here, and I want to encourage you to watch the show Saving Grace. Is it Saving Grace? Yes, Saving Grace on PBS, y'all. Great show. I checked it out, and they do have a website, so check out their website also. So today's show is our third Sunday politics show. We got a lot to talk about, so let me bring on my special guest. First, we'll bring on Jamarr Brown. Jamarr, good to see you today.
Hey, Marilyn, how are you?
Very good. So, Jamarr, tell us what organization you're with.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jamarr Brown. I serve as the Director of Electoral Programs at an organization called Repower. It's a national progressive training organization and capacity building organization. We work across the progressive movement. We work with activists, we work with campaigners, campaign staff, candidates, and now even expanding to elected officials. We've launched a governance academy. And so we are just trying to work all across the movement to make sure that as we organize, as we get people elected, but we also implement and pass the policies that we so desperately have been fighting about in this election. And then I'll also proudly serve as a member of the Democratic National Committee. And so a lot of post-election conversations. And so I'm definitely looking forward to being here. And it's always good to see you, third Sunday.
All right, very good. Let's bring on our next special guest, Brandon Upson. Hey, Brandon, how are you?
I'm great, Marilyn. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing good.
You're
welcome. Always. No, you're good. You're good. We can hear you. You know, I'm always happy to have you and Jamarr on to do our third Sunday politics conversation.
I feel like
tell
we
us
need to
about
have communion.
Amplify. I know, right? We probably need to. Tell us about your organization, Amplify Action.
Yeah, so my name is Brandon Upson. I'm the founder of Amplify Action. We're a nonprofit organization with a 501c4 arm, Amplify Action Fund. We focus on rebuilding political power within marginalized communities through the civic education and mobilization of Black men. So we started back in June of this year. Since June, we've registered, as of today, about 37,000 Black voters. We did a massive GOTV effort across our southern states, knocked on 76,000 doors in Georgia, in Fulton County, DeKalb, and Cobb County, and then about 180,000 doors in South Carolina, and another 40,000 doors in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're gearing up to, do it all over again in Georgia. We're doing voter registration on the ground in the state right now, focusing on getting another 5,000 Black men registered to vote, specifically in Richmond County, and looking to knock on 250,000 doors across the state for this special election, or this runoff election.
That's right. Very good, Brandon. And thank you. Thank you for all your work. And you too, Jamarr. Thank you for all of your work. we see the impact every day. And Brandon, I'm going to come back to that 30,000 plus newly registered voters, because I want to know what you're going to be doing in the future with those voters. All right. But today's topic, folks, is we're going to talk elections, and we're going to talk, where do we go from here? But before we do that, Brandon, is your beautiful wife still next to you? Have her waiting. No, she not.
No,
right.
She just went to the store.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we'll catch her later. So, folks, we are talking election results today. This seemed like it was the world's longest election, but it was not. It was not. The results have been longer, but I think there was a little bit more tension around this one. And after 9 or 10 days, we finally know that Joe Biden is president-elect and will be president in January, regardless of what the current occupant of the White House thinks. So that's going to happen, folks. It's going to happen. So, Brandon and Jamarr, let me start with Jamarr. Jamarr, it's been a contentious election. We still have the current president who is in a state of denial. You got that right, state of denial. But anyway,
we don't have electoral votes for him.
Yes. He's not going to win. He's not going. That it is what it is. And but what do you consider to be the short-term repercussions of what's going on, though, with him denying the results of the election?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things I'll say in this election, it's my petty side coming out, but one of the things I'll say is Joe Biden won with the exact amount of votes that Donald Trump won. Literally, the results flipped.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, there are different states that led to that. So I think that's a deeper conversation, maybe for today or not today.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that 306 to 232 was the exact same thing for Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. So that's an interesting thing that happened. So I just want to point that out. But I think there are a lot of repercussions that are happening, and I think we see that now. It's the continued unrest in the country. You saw all across the country various protests and demonstrations. He even drove through one of them, in D.C., if anyone saw that coverage. And it's the unrest of saying that democracy and government is built for us, but when someone is head of the government or someone runs for a position in government and then they won't concede or they won't accept that they've lost, it sends a message to people who showed up and voted.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, even if you showed up, and mind you, right, like you said, this was a different election. So that you showed up in the middle of a pandemic and went to the polls, that someone who ran in the race that you may or may not have voted for, depending on how you voted, he just won't give it up. And not only that, I think the second repercussion is there is a movement both amongst activists that are continuing this spiral, but also amongst elected officials. And these are people who are making decisions for our lives every single day, and they can't even wrap their minds around it. And so you have people who are like Lindsey Graham, who are saying, no, count the votes, count the votes, count the votes. And the votes have been counted for the most part, right, across the country. And so I think you see that as a second repercussion. The third thing is the transition. There's a huge piece to this right now that Joe Biden has to put a government together to implement policy, from the cabinet level to the White House staff level to the presidential and political appointments, right? These are people that are going to be working to implement policy and do public engagement and other opportunities as well. And so now you can't begin to transition, and then Joe Biden's not getting the intelligence information, the national security information. Donald Trump literally is the greatest threat to our democracy right now. He's literally the greatest threat to our national security, because you have world leaders who want to work with Joe Biden and they want to make a transition, and you have somebody who literally is standing in the way. The other day, the press secretary, I don't remember her name, but the press secretary, she basically said, we look forward to him being sworn in. The Secretary of State stood on in France on the world stage and said, we look forward to getting ready for a second Trump administration or Trump term. And so the fact that these people won't wrap their minds around what is going on and what has happened, it really speaks to their lack of respect to the will of the voter. And that's ultimately the bottom line. And I'm just going to go out and say, there's mostly privileged white men who did not have their way and somehow think they can manipulate now the court system that they have packed to get their way. But the votes won't allow you to happen. Joe Biden has won by almost 5 million votes. Mm-hmm. You're not going to find 5 million votes anywhere. And so my thing is have a seat and go. But I think that those are some of the repercussions. I think there's an impact on the voters, right? That I showed up and voted and this man is acting a fool. There's an impact on activists, other elected officials, world leaders, and then just basically how our government is run. And MSNBC, they had the previous GSA administrator who basically said this should have already started, the transition. Because there's so many documents and there's so much information that people are going to have to learn really quickly. People are really pushing Joe Biden on diversity in the cabinet. Well, you can't have diversity if you can't appoint anybody, or they can't get transitioned in. People are pushing on student loan reform and COVID-19. Well, you can't make those moves. That yes, Joe Biden has put together an advisory task force, but they can't implement anything. And so, as y'all know, that COVID cases across the country are rising. Every 49 states they reported have had a rise. So it's 50 states. So, you do the math. Right? And so these things, we cannot stop the spread of COVID. We cannot stop the peril of American lives being lost with one man who all of this is about his ego. It's not even about the democracy. It's not about government. It's not about the American people. It's not even about the 70 million people that voted for him. He didn't even have enough respect for them to bow out of the process that there wasn't enough of them who voted for him. So those are 8 or 9 different repercussions.
Jamarr, you've been holding this in, haven't you?
One of the things I say in this election, I have had to play like an election therapist that clearly I'm not certified for, that I've had to continually tell people what the process is, what's going on, why this is taking a little bit longer, etc. So now I get to say what I think because I've been playing therapist for 2 weeks.
I know, right? I know. I got you. 2 things I want to point out, then I'm going to jump to Brandon. One, it doesn't matter who you voted for. We had high turnout. Biden had the highest in history. Democracy worked. In this case, when it came to the vote, democracy worked. It's the foolishness afterwards that is harming democracy and threatening democracy. And also, I think in this moment, the more I realize and take a step back, this is the time for Biden, because it is his experience that's going to get us through the transition, because he knows government. This is where his 40 years in government is going to benefit the citizens of the United States. We need Biden right now because we have someone who does not understand government, who does not care to understand government, who is holding up this transition. But it is Biden's experience and knowledge that's going to get us through this. Brandon, your thoughts regarding and bring in a little bit now the long-term repercussions of this also. But your thoughts, Brandon.
Yeah, and I want to start by saying what you said. He doesn't understand government. I think he understands government very well, and so does the cabal around him understand government, because they use it to their advantage to try to deny the workings and the proper protocol of democracy. And Jamarr gave us the 30,000 foot view of the repercussions. I want to bring it down to the ground as well, because right now what we're seeing is 2 groups of people, because we literally split the country in half, right? 47 million, 74 million people, almost 75 voted for President-elect Biden, and 70 million people voted for the former President Donald Trump, right? But that's still looking at, this country, what's happened over the last 4 years, that is still a very, very close race. If we look at it, those results came down to a handful of states to determine who the next president of the United States was. And it's not because Black folks didn't show up. It's not because white men, did their thing that they've done in history. But I have to put the ball in the right court. There were white women across this country who saw and heard who and what Donald Trump was in 2016 and voted for him, felt guilty in 2017, put on their pussy hats and went, excuse my language, whatever, and
I
marched in the
was there, so that's
streets.
cool.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
marched in the streets,
Mm-hmm.
and then turned around in 2020 and voted for him again and brought a friend with them. So that is an issue. And the narrative that we're talking through right now is, the 19% of black men who voted for Donald Trump, but we need to talk about the 80% of black men who voted for him, and the 90+% of black women who voted for him to make this or not for Trump, but for Joe Biden, to make this transition possible. But what we're seeing on the ground right now is people being intentionally misinformed, and now they are doubling down on what their gut feelings are, and unfortunately is wrong. You have preachers in the pulpit preaching that Donald Trump was sent by God and this election was rigged and we have to pray so he gets a second term, when we already know people will fight over money, they'll fight over land, but they will die for their God. And
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the rhetoric that's going on, people are saying this is a fight, a spiritual battle, a fight against good and evil. And everyone believes that they're fighting the good fight. And it is drawing a deeper wedge in our society, in our communities, to where people are now fearful because of the outcome of this election. And it shouldn't be so. The repercussions here is that long-term division that I don't think one person can solve. Joe Biden, even though he wants to heal the soul of the nation, he can't do it on his own. And as a community, as a nation, as a society, we must commit holistically, all of us, to ushering in some grace and understanding and moving forward. But they keep stoking the fire.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot happening. People are using fear to win elections. That never helps, anyone outside of getting those people elected. So there's a lot of work that's left to do, a lot of healing, a lot of come to Jesus moments that need to happen, and a whole lot of truth that need to be spread. But unfortunately, the ones with the biggest microphone are only promoting the narratives that benefit them. So that's it.
That is so true, Brandon. And I kind of realize with the mainstream media, they may not have the worst of intentions, but they kind of have some lazy journalistic skills happening. And it results in them following the narrative rather than reporting the narrative. And one thing I want us to concentrate on, at least needs more than a mention, is the diversity of the coalition that elected Joe Biden. Because if you listen to mainstream media, you would think all Hispanics did not vote for Joe Biden. And that is simply not true. And it speaks to that the Hispanic Latin vote is not a monolith. Just as we speak as African Americans,
Right.
that we are not a monolith, the Hispanic vote, Latin vote, is not a monolith either. So Biden may have lost Florida, and the Cuban Hispanic vote was a large part of why he lost Florida, but he won Arizona.
Right.
Because of the Hispanic vote and the Navajo Nation vote, which voted at 97%, the highest in history. And I just read yesterday that some of these folks rode horses 2 hours across the Navajo Nation to cast their vote. And I used to live in Arizona, so I understand the just imagine Horry, Georgetown, and Charleston County put together. That's the Navajo Nation. It's actually bigger than that, but that's one county. And these folks rode on horses to go vote for Joe Biden. And we need to give them due credit for what the sacrifices for that vote and what they did for that vote. And that came because of the high death rate from COVID and the fact that the federal government has not given them the money that they were promised. And quite frankly, just as the government does not have a plan for us, it didn't have a plan for them either and did not execute it. And these folks got out and they voted. And regarding the Hispanic vote, these folks have been organizing for at least 6 years because they're the folks that got out Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who was a long-term when I lived in Arizona, he was sheriff, and he was sheriff too long then.
Right.
And they organized to get him out. So I'm speaking, if we have got to recognize the diversity of this coalition for two reasons. One, getting it organized on a grassroots level and getting them out to vote. And number two, which is even more important, this is the future of the United States that the Trump supporters are deathly afraid of, and why they are reacting the way they are reacting. And moving forward, if you want to win elections, that's the coalition. The diverse coalition is the one that you need to get out. That's the one, but you gotta work the grassroots to get them out. And that's the future. So I want to jump in. Let's start talking. Where do we go from here, Jamarr? What are your thoughts regarding where do we go from here?
Well, I'm glad you laid up this kind of results in terms of the diverse coalition, because there's also got to be a diversity and accountability. And there are different communities that have different interests. And we know that we had a very, shall I say, as somebody who was involved in an interesting presidential primary. I mean, we had the most candidates probably in modern history. We had the most diverse field in modern history, right? And we ended with Joe Biden. And we know that even after the primary, there was a lot of work to do to persuade a lot of communities. When you talk about the Navajo Nation, when you talk about Latinx communities, and I want to name, when you were talking about Arizona, I want to name young Latinx folks. The young people are the ones who showed up, right? When the young people don't vote, that's not true. And how Black people always overperform, right? And so when we talk about all these communities coming together, even in the midst of all of the craziness of the pandemic and everything going on, and then also in the midst of everybody not being with Joe Biden, but that shows his experience in 40 years in government to really understand how to bring people together who may agree or disagree. And so he was able to build that coalition. And now it's time to make sure that, one, we have representation in government, right? It's not just representation on policy. It's about who's in the room. So we're looking at who he appoints to the cabinet. We're looking at who gets these ambassadorships and all, you know, he has like 5,000 appointments or whatever it is that he has to make. So now we get to look at those 5,000 appointments. Who from Navajo Nation is going to be looked at for the cabinet? Black folks are going to be looked at for if a Supreme Court seat opened again. So if we look at our government, we have to make sure we're talking about that representation. Also, on another level of representation, then we need to be recruiting for 2021 for local races across the country. And then also 2022, because the midterms started last week. We still don't know who's running for what across the country. And so those are things that are important. The second thing that is of interest is understanding the power dynamics in government. So right now, the Republicans would be in the majority in the Senate. There are two U.S. Senate seats, as Brandon alluded to earlier, in Georgia that are up. One is a young white gentleman, and one is a Black pastor, right? And so I think that those are things that are very important. We need to win both of those seats to bring the margins close so that our vice president would have power to support our president, right? And so people have to understand that in Georgia, if anybody's watching out there, and Brandon, as you and your folks are going down there, people have to understand this is make or break between if a COVID bill makes it out of the Senate. This is make or break if a student loan reform bill makes it out of the Senate. This is make or break when funding any bill really over the next 2 years, makes it out of the Senate. So we've got to make sure that we are continuing to re-educate and retrain folks, even in this democracy that folks showed up in unprecedented numbers. Texas has runoffs in December too, but not as big as Georgia. And so, there are a lot of states that are in that situation where people have to go again, and it's hard enough to get them to one election, much less another one 2 months later. And so we've got to make sure that we win those Georgia seats so that we can move the needle on things. And the third thing that I'll say is really thinking not just of a long-term strategy, but what is our investment strategy? Not just dollars, but resources in organizations. And so at Repower, we work across national organizations. Brandon works across organizations in the region and statewide to understand, we see who shows up to vote. And what would have happened in 2016 if the same people voted in 2016, what would happen? We wouldn't have probably had to go through half of this mess. And so it's really important to make sure that we take this opportunity with this diverse coalition of how are we building proactive strategic opportunities so that we don't go through this again. Because the last 4 years, that was a mess. I mean, and it should have never happened. But we fell asleep at the wheel, right, as strategists. And so I think that's a thing that we have to look at. And so where are we investing? Where are we training folks? Where are we recruiting folks? How are we helping existing organizations that are deepening the leadership? And another thing, I'm just going to say this from a Democratic perspective. I know you nonpartisan, but I'm just going to say, for example, since we're talking about it, is at some point we have to stop running behind people who are not showing up to the polls for us. At some point, because if you spend the money that you spend on the white women wearing their pussy hats, you get more young Latinx folks. You get more people who look like me and Brandon in Maryland to the polls. You get more, AAPI folks to the polls. You get more LGBTQ. I mean, you can go down the list because the Democratic Party has a very specific focus on trying to get moderate Democrats, independents, or they think they're going to flip some of these Republicans, and they may or may not. And so we've got to be clearer with this diverse coalition about who the priorities are, because we need these people to show up in Georgia. We need every single person to show up again, and not because you've changed your strategy. We've seen now that there's a strategy in Georgia that works. Let's not mess it up. Because what I have seen, to be quite honest, in Georgia is we talk about John Ossoff. They hardly talk about Reverend Warnock, but he got the most votes. And so that we're going back to that same strategy. Let's get the white moderates and we're going to win. And not that we're going to dismiss all white people. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that we clearly can see the exit polls over the past 10 to 20 years. We can see clearly with the numbers where the numbers are trending. Now it's time for the investment, not only of dollars, but of resources and of seats at the table when strategy is being employed. So that when you have a fair fight with Stacey Abrams, or that you have the Navajo Nation that has their own organizing, we need to be investing in those and not creating more things to do. And so how are we continuing to do that work intentionally, and how are we doing that strategically so that we're placing not just the dollars, but we're placing the right people in leadership positions? The last thing I'll say is there are a lot of local organizations that are in Georgia, and I'm using Georgia because it's the most recent thing. But there are a lot of organizations in Georgia, and if we really deepen the leadership of those folks, they can execute and turn out the work. Because you have to remember that, yes, money has been going into Georgia. But when you look at Georgia and you look at Arizona and you look at North Carolina, which almost went blue, in other states, even Texas, we almost went blue. 5 points is the closest it's been since the 60s, 70s, right? And so when we talk about, things like that, it's just we've got to be more intentional about what the infrastructure is and who is in that infrastructure. And I think this campaign has shown us who needs to be there. Now we just have to make the long-term commitment to keep them there.
That's very true. And before I hand it off to Brandon, I want to remind everyone that you are watching A Gathering Place hosted by the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. And if not, all three of us, definitely, Jamarr Brown came ready and loaded.
Well, you see me.
And it's speaking truth today, and it's speaking what we need to hear today. And Jamarr, I want to speak to what you were saying and go back to what I was saying, and that's why I said the diversity of this coalition is the future. It is the now, and it is the future, and that's where the investment and resources need to be placed, because that is clearly what Stacey Abrams has the example in Georgia. She built a whole new table. And I am into that, because when I started the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, I have said from day one, I am not here for a seat at the table. I am here to build a whole new table.
Yeah, flip the table over and start over.
Flip the table and start all over. And that's what Stacey Abrams did. She built a whole new table. The one thing I want to point out to people is that it took her 10 years. This is not a campaign to campaign investment. This is a long-term investment that we must make to make, as you say, flip the table over. And I think that's a little biblical. Flipping tables. All right, now.
Flip the table one or two.
Thank you. And y'all, there's plenty. What people need to understand, not only do we need to build new tables, we need to build a whole new table. We need to build multiple new tables, because the key is you can have multiple tables in the same room. All right, and that's what we need to do. Just because I'm building a table over here does not discount Stacey Abrams' table over there, because we have those tables in a whole room. And if you think about it as a country, we have a lot of room in this country to build a lot of new tables. All right, so Brandon, I want to hand that off to you and jump off. I know you ready to go too. So Brandon, first of all, let me jump this question, Brandon. You registered over 30,000 new voters. Where do we go from here? What are you doing with those registered voters, and how do they fit in that long-term picture?
Yeah, and just going back to what you said, it's about creating that new space, making space, creating new tables, even opening up new rooms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ladra. So, my heart's desire is for us to our long-term plan. We say that if we can change the politics of the South, we can change the politics of America. And how do we do that? I see us having young men who never even considered voting, and we registered them and they voted for the first time. Then we teach them and train them how to become activists and advocates for their communities and the issues that are important to them. And then we help them, some of them go on to be strategists, operatives, campaign managers, and even run for office to represent those same issues in those same communities.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen with a magic wand. I know Stacey Abrams didn't find some red pumps, click her heels together and say, I think I can. She actually rolled up her sleeves and got to work and didn't wait on anyone to give her permission. And that's where we are today. With these 30 plus thousand Black voters, we're tracking that over 20,000 of them actually went out and voted in this election. Of the 76,000 doors we knocked on in Georgia, spoke to 21,000 people there, and nearly 8,000 of them went out and voted in Georgia, right? And we're waiting on those numbers to come back for South Carolina as well. But we have to create this pipeline. Oh, it's great for us to have a new room and a new table, pull up some folding chairs, but who's going to sit at those tables? So we need to develop that bench of people who are trained and ready to sit at the table, bold enough to speak truth to power and to advocate for their communities so we can finally get things done. The last thing I will say is that Jamarr said it very poignantly about the investments. I truly believe that the things you water will grow, right? And the South has proven itself worthy of a little bit of water, like from Texas to Georgia to North Carolina. If we look at the opportunities in Mississippi and Alabama, right, we are seeing demographical shifts in South Carolina that if we only had a little bit more water, we could start seeing things grow in the right direction so that we can change the politics of the South and change the politics of America. Go ahead, Jamarr.
Can I say two things? There's 2 points, and it's just in my spirit. I got to say it. So since we're on a roll, and I wanted Brandon to finish, but there's one thing that, because you talked, Marilyn, right, about building new tables or flipping the table, whatever we're doing with the tables, right? It's about what you do with the tables, right? And that's what you're talking about, Brandon, right? It's not just building the table to say, look at us, we're here. It's about saying, we have 30,000 new voters. This is what we want to do. We want to run all these things that, Amplify is doing. That's one thing. And then 2, when I talk about investments, yes, it's financial, but there are other types of resources, right? You can connect people to funders. You can connect people to other resources and things. So I don't want it to all be tied to money, because there's other things that can be done that are considered investments that help organizations and help movements grow. But also, I think it's incumbent upon us as a movement to be intentional, which sometimes we are or are not, but be intentional and be strategic about that. And I'm just going to this is no shade if anybody's from Kentucky on this call, but but if Amy McGrath had $40 to $50 million, what would that have done in North Carolina to get another point? When you're looking at like North Carolina, or you're looking at these other places like Texas that got within 5 points of that, Mike actually did better than people expected, but with little to no investment, or Florida, where we needed to deepen our relationships, maybe with the Cuban American community. And so it's not just about having the dollars and having the resources, about how we allocate them and how we're equitable in who we allocate them to to get the results that we want to build this coalition. Because what we have to think about is, too, going forward, people turn 18 every day. So yes, this was the highest turnout. This was the most diverse coalition. Yes, I agree, and I'm very happy. But there are about 15 to 18 million new people 4 years from now. So how are we deepening the investments in these organizations to galvanize those young people that are graduating high school? Like, they need to walk across the stage with a voter registration form in their hand. We've got to start getting those. We've got to bring the same people that we've turned out this year back out in January, and again in 2021, 22, and in 2024, you got 15 million new people.
Absolutely. And Jamarr, can we say?
So how are we being strategic over the next 2 months, 6 months, year, 4 years to make sure that we maintain but deepen this coalition so that we can continue building on progress? To your point, Marilyn, that this doesn't happen overnight. So just wanted to add.
Right. And can I talk about the last minute money, the last minute resources? You know, I saw it in 3 of the states that we work in the last 2 weeks. You know, a money dump, a resources dump happens in those areas, and they say, oh Lord, we need, you know, door hangers, we need door knockers, we need to put people on the ground to do this and do that. And we're waiting to the last minute to try to save the day and ask people to pull a miracle out of the sky, when we should have been making these investments not the same year as the vote, not the same month, but on an ongoing basis, so that we can build these relationships and create this pipeline. Look at what happened in South Carolina, right? Jamie Harrison, I just got to give him a double thumbs up. But he raised more money than any senatorial candidate in the history of running in America, right? And he still lost. But he didn't lose because he had a lack of resources. He lost because of the timing that those resources were allocated and activated. You know, and now we're talking about building a foundation that can continue on for that growth, because it's going to take time. They didn't win in Georgia because Amplify Action came there, you know, 4 weeks before the election. They won in Georgia because, you know, Stacey Abrams and Justin Tanner, and, you know, the list goes on. It's a dozen activists and organizers in that state that have taken their part of the pie and focused on it and worked in their lane to push the needle to make Georgia go blue. We got to make investments right now, not for tomorrow, but for 2 cycles from now.
Well, I would actually say we need to make the investment 10 years from now, because we have to remember there's a census every 10 years, and we're about to get slammed by the results of this year's census and the fact that the majority of the state legislatures are Republican controlled. And this is why, speaking to what you said, Brandon, and Jamarr has said, this is why you have to have a long-term strategy, long-term investment of resources, and that includes education, because people have to understand the impact of this census is for 10 years. So we need a 10-year. Anybody in business, you don't write a business plan for 2 years. You write a business plan for 5 to 10 years. And I do want to say it is going to take an investment of time, folks, but let me also contradict myself a little bit. It's actually going to be a little bit faster in South Carolina than in Georgia. It's going to be a little bit faster in North Carolina, and so on. And why? Because the blueprint is out there and you already have people working. So you see what they did in Georgia. You just need to customize it to your state, replicate it and customize it to your state, because each state has its own identity. And another thing that is going to speed it up is technology. Technology makes things faster and hopefully more efficient. So if you take a broad view of this, it's not going to take us 10 years in South Carolina. It may take us 8 years, but you got to have a 10-year plan, right? Because you got to keep in mind that census, and census goes towards policies, issues, and funding of programs to help our community. So you got to keep that in mind. I dare say we need to have a 10-year plan, but an election campaign execution of the plan. And that's the way we need to think of it. And so I just wanted to bring that. Go ahead, Jamarr. While you bring it up, we're going to be joined by our elder full of wisdom. I'm going to wait till he comes on there. Our elder full of wisdom, Jim Felder, who he's so good, he's going to come in and hop off. He's going to give us words of wisdom. But before you talk, Jim, Jamarr has some words to say, then we'll jump to Jim.
All right.
Hey, Jim, and I just want to reiterate the point that our investments and how we invest is connected to power. To your point, right, that you're talking about the census, and we see that the demographic trends in this country are more suburban. We see that the trends are more people of color, right? That's happening. And so I think that we have a unique opportunity to understand that we know every 10 years, every decade, we're doing the census. The year after that, we're doing redistricting, because the way that the lines are drawn, that's about representation. So when people are like, my representative doesn't listen to me, I can't talk to my representative, I can't run in that district, or whatever the case is, 2021 is the pivotal time to draw those districts, to make them fair and to make them competitive so that anybody in that community can run. And so we've got to understand also our work that we're doing, whether it's over 2 years or 10 years, it's all connected to power. And power has to be harnessed in the grassroots and in the community. So just wanted to add that. But we've got to always understand that power dynamic in everything that we do.
Very good. Thank you very much, Jamarr. Jim, just to catch you up, what we were talking about, a whole lot. we talked about the election results, and then we're in the midst of talking about where do we go from here, and we're looking at Georgia and the work and time put in by Stacey Abrams, and people need to realize it took her 10 years of grassroots organizing and a diverse coalition, and actually that's how Joe Biden won, with a diverse coalition of voters who turned out. And we're just talking about how we can apply this to where we are, being in the place that we are, South Carolina, Texas, and beyond. But Jim, any thoughts? I know you've been looking at the numbers just like we have. You and I talked about it briefly, but any thoughts regarding the election results and where do we go from here?
Jamarr said it all. Grassroots. We got to get back to grassroots. We got to turn people out to vote. And if you don't go where they are, they're not going to turn out. I know you all have talked about the last election, 72%, only 72% turned out. Obama was the highest we ever had. That was 76%. We dropped from that back to 72% on this election. In order for Jamie Harrison to win, he needed at least an 85% turnout of black voters and at least 20% of white vote. If he'd done that, he would have been in. But we didn't do that because we forget that all politics are local, and you've got to start at the grassroots level. And it's not something you do just before the election day. You do it all year long. You can't rely on members of a party to do it because they're not going to do it. They're going to have a monthly meeting. They'll talk about it, and then they go their own way. But you need to have somebody in that neighborhood, on that street, who knows every voter on that street, to mobilize them, keep talking to them all year long, and come election day, have a way to get them to the polls. So it's grassroots. Stacey Abrams has done that. She's shown that grassroots politics can work, and see what is happening in Georgia now. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you sticking to that story. Y'all at the bottom, I'm trying to do it as each person speaks, but Jim is with the Gullah Geechee Leadership Organization, amongst a lot of other organizations that he's with. I encourage everyone to go to everyone's website here, because we got some folks on this panel, y'all, every third Sunday. They give us an education. I get an education. I've been around a while. Jim's been around a while, but we always learn something new. The Gullah Geechee Leadership, if you want to get involved, go to gullahgeecheeleadership.org. We got lots of good issue information there. Jamarr is with repower.org and Amplify Action, ampourvote.org with Brandon Upson. Just want to remind everyone of that. And thank you, Jim, for those words. Brandon, anything to add to what Jim said?
Oh, I can never come behind Mr. Felder. Thank you. I'm just trying to walk in his footsteps. That's all. Folks don't talk about it enough, but the feat that he did to register, nearly 1 million voters. I'm sure it's over 1 million now in the state of South Carolina and across the South. The work that he's done to create the tables that we're sitting at now. I think that, for us to really understand grassroots organizing and what it means to move our state forward, we have to understand what our leaders and our mentors and the folks who came before us, what they were able to do, how they accomplished it, what some of those pitfalls and barriers were, how they overcame it so that we can take it to the next level. And we can't do this by reinventing the wheel. We have to go to them for the guidance and get it done. So I thank you for everything you did and everything that you do, Mr. Felder.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Very good, very good. It's so true that we do need to go back to the grassroots, go back to some ways how it was done before, but modernize it with technology. Cannot emphasize that enough. Technology is a tool that we can use, but it is not the only tool. It is about building relationships. This is a long-term investment, just as Jamarr has said. We've got to start now for what we want to happen in 2030. But we have to build the bricks in the foundation by getting out to vote, by showing up for city, county council, school board meetings, by running for office and understanding policies and issues. That is huge. We have to be civically engaged. We have to know the Constitution, y'all. I was unpacking some boxes today in my office and ran across my old Constitution that I inherited from my mother, the book. And we've used it so much, it no longer has the covers on it. I just know it's the Constitution, but when you open it up, there's the Constitution. We've got to start teaching people even about the Constitution. This is real grassroots education. It was done during the Civil Rights Movement, and now it is our time. This is our time. And we need to stop complaining, and we need to start doing. And I'm going to hand it off to Jamarr, but before I do, as a Black woman in these United States of America, I have got to give a shout out to my sisters, because Black women did it, y'all. Black women did it. Give yourself a hand, because Black women have been doing the work, and we love our brothers. Right. We've been bringing the brothers out along with us. But we got to talk about it. We got to talk about who did not turn out, who voted the way we hope that they did not vote. But it is what it is at this point. But how do we address that? Jamarr?
And Marilyn.
Yes.
Marilyn, before Jamarr, can I just acknowledge that I couldn't do what I do without my wife. So she over here. She's never too far.
All right now. That's all right. Thank you for showing us your lovely wife, because you're right. You can't do it without her either. All right. So Jamarr, add your thoughts to that, Jamarr. Who turned out?
Yeah, one of the things I think that's important, especially to the point that you say about Black women, we've seen the Stand With Black Women shirts. We've seen the Stand With Black Women campaign. It's time to make it actionable for women who have really stood the test of time to still show up for this democracy that has not always yielded them the results. And when I say yielded results, I'm saying how Black women have died at the highest rates across the world on hospital beds bearing birth to children, right? When we talk about the Black women being ostracized in our healthcare system, when we talk about Black women not being safe in their communities because of the police, we saw Breonna Taylor, we see it, Black women, all these different things that have happened. That even when people say democracy is messy, if you are a Black person in this country, specifically a Black woman, democracy has been very messy to you. And that Black women still showed up in the midst of a pandemic, I must say. That Black women, I heard Black women, they were like, we're going to walk over the glass shards, but that's what we got to do. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're going to do. So I say that Black women saved all of us from the saga that has been the last 4 years. But one of the things I want to highlight, especially about Black women, is we've talked a lot about Stacey Abrams. And I love that we're talking about Stacey. We have to recognize Kamala Harris, and we have to recognize the history of this, that she's the first time that we have ever elected a woman nationally has been a Black woman, not a white woman, a Black woman. We've got to own that we harnessed our collective power to do that, because no white woman has ever been elected, and white women are voting with the other side. So there's some things where white women have tied themselves to white male masculinity and power that's not working for them now. And so that's the real truth of it. And Black women have really organized. But one of the things I'll say that is important, again, about Stacey Abrams, we have to recognize that, yes, Stacey Abrams has worked over the past 10 years. We have to also recognize that she had an election stolen from her in the middle of that 10 years. Yeah. And so where we learned a lot of these lessons around organizing, that's why what we don't also talk about is, yes, they did the organizing, but they also did the civics and the teaching about election protection. How are you supposed to vote? What's supposed to be your voter experience when you show up to the polls? So, and if something went wrong, here's the resources that you had in order to make sure that you could protect your right to vote, because we know that's the biggest thing that they're trying to take. That is our power, as John Lewis has taught us, the late John Lewis, has taught us. And so now we have a responsibility to our Black women, not only to show up in representation, but to show up in policy and to show up in results. It's not enough for Joe Biden to pick Kamala Harris as vice president. That's wonderful. That's historic. And we love our vice president. I'm going to call her that. But who is Joe Biden helping to recruit to run for office? Who is Joe Biden appointing in his cabinet? Who is Joe Biden appointing to lead departments in cabinet agencies across the country? Who are the people, if a Black woman runs for governor in 2022, is he supporting them? And so it's really, again, like we said earlier, time for that accountability. I posted on my social media, those who might follow me, and I said, no longer will Black people continue to save this country and this democracy without a return on our investment. And our investment has been our votes. Our investment has been our pain, our trauma, our triggers, policy, all of those things. And so we've got to make sure that we understand that Black women have put in the labor and have done the time and have gotten the bear brunt of a lot of things. And so it's time for us to really own that and really be thinking about that and really moving forward. And so we've got to continue that work. Again, going back to investments, there's an organization based in Brooklyn, New York called Higher Heights of America. Many of you may or may not. They have the Black Women Lead hashtag in the T-shirts and sweatshirts and whatnot. And they've been doing this work. They didn't just start yesterday or last week or last month. They've been doing this work probably, I think, over a decade or even more. And I hope I'm representing that fact right. But, ultimately, I think at the end of the day, that's where we go back to those investments, because when we need Black women to get trained, because you have to create a particular curriculum for Black women. You can't, the Emily's List, you can't teach the same way, because a Black woman's experience is always going to be different, whether she runs for office, whether she sits on a board or commission, she's an activist or, whatever it is. And so we've got to really make sure that we're understanding that Stand with Black Women is now actionable. It's not just standing and posting and wearing a shirt. It's about, what are you doing? Pick up your phone and call a Black woman and tell her to run for office. And then when you tell her,
and write a check.
Then when you tell her to run for office, write a check behind it.
Yeah.
When you write your check, then your friends will go write a check too.
That's right.
And then
That's
tell them
Marilyn,
write a check.
Marilyn.
We know that fundraising resources, again, back to investment, resources is the hardest thing. And that's one of the top reasons that Black people don't run or run and are unsuccessful, is because we don't have the equitable distribution of resources. So I just wanted to make those points.
All right,
Marilyn,
Tim.
Marilyn, the historian in me won't let us quit here before I lift up some Black women who set the stages for those who are here now. We can't forget Rosa Parks in Alabama. We can't forget Fannie Lou Hamer in Mississippi. We can't forget Ruby Hurley, who ran the southeast region of the NAACP. We can't forget right here at home, Septima Clark and Majestica Simpkin. And we cannot forget Ella Baker. A lot of folk don't know who Ella Baker was. She was Dr. King's person when he started SCLC, and she was the one that called us together. I'm talking about us students in Atlanta and other places, say, you need to form your own organization. We formed SNCC because of Ella Baker. She said, you need to do your own thing. So they were the ground floor for women today. And I just don't want to forget our heroines.
That's right. That's very true, Jim. And did you say Fannie Lou Hamer?
I did say Fannie Lou
Yeah.
Hamer.
Yeah. And I keep saying the table because I say that not only because we do need to build a new table, I say it because I honor Shirley Chisholm also. So, Jim, I'm glad you mentioned those names because we need to know our history so we can understand the context of what's happening right now. So we do need to honor those. So thank you for calling those names, Jim, because we need to hear those names. And if y'all don't know them, y'all need to pick up some books and know about them and talk to some folks who knew them and get educated, because this informs what we do to this day. It informs what Jamarr just told us.
Yeah.
You know, the work has always been continuous. It's just with Black women, we have been made invisible about 90% of the time. And we keep bringing this country back from the brink of its own foolishness. And it is, look, Black women told y'all when that man rolled down his golden escalators, we knew what was going to be, we knew the trouble that was going to come in. And we said that, and no one listened to us, you know, and that speaks because of history and because the work we've put in, and that we tend to be a little bit more sophisticated. And I do want to talk about that also, Jim and Jamarr, and I know Brandon, he's popping back in, is Jamarr, you were talking about it earlier a little bit, but I want to harken this back to even back in 2008, and how we have become more sophisticated in the execution of long-term strategy and our plans. And yes, we need a lot of work. A lot of work needs to be done. But I want to bring this up because in 2008, we elected Barack Obama, and then a lot of people, because of their lack of sophistication when it comes to elections and government, in 2010 did not come back out.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, so it speaks to 2020, y'all, that we have to come back out. It is just not a one and done. But the responsibility lies on the institutions to educate people. But there's also responsibility as individuals that we have to be ready to accept the education. As a matter of fact, we need to go seek it, grab it, and if it's not there, demand it. Get educated and stay involved in the process. And our first test is probably Texas in December, but the real test that people are really paying attention to are the Senate races in January in Georgia. We've got to stay involved, folks. You can't back out and stay home.
Absolutely.
Because if you blame, if we don't win, and then you 2 years later blame Joe Biden for not doing anything, it didn't start in 2022. It started in 2021 because we didn't get that Senate. And we've got to get the Senate. We've got to get the Senate. Brandon, I see you shaking your head. Any thoughts? And we got about 2 more minutes, y'all. We're going to stay at an hour.
Well,
so we're going to wrap up. Everybody going to say something. We'll start with Brandon.
Yeah,
Brandon.
I got some really quick ones. We can't afford to lose 1,000 seats again this go round. We can't. We got to make ground and expand ground, right? Also, we have to make sure that we're creating that bench that we were talking about earlier. But I'm not just talking about the bench of people who are running for office or anything like that. I'm talking about the people who are running progressive-minded organizations. I remember in 2016, I Googled, the top 100 progressive organizations in the country and found that over 60% of them were ran by white women, and many of them focused on organizing Black folks. That just ain't gonna work, right? So we got to change the makeup of those organizations and the leadership of those organizations. There's no reason why Jamarr Brown isn't running Repower right now with all of the knowledge that he has. And I'll make that endorsement right now. I know it's a white woman.
Me too. I second that endorsement. I second that endorsement.
But the last
in trouble now.
They don't sign my checks.
Good trouble. Good trouble. Necessary trouble.
Absolutely. But the last thing I would say is you're absolutely right. We have to work as one to educate our community and push our folks to the right direction. What we're seeing right now in Georgia as we're engaging with people is folks still don't know that there's a runoff, and they're asking why there's a runoff. So we're educating people as to why there's a runoff right now, and why we need them to go out and do it again. So if you know somebody in Georgia, text them and tell them what's going on. Call them and make sure they understand, because everybody isn't sitting behind in front of the TV keeping up with this like we are. So we have to continue to work together to promote our community and educate our community as a whole. And I am excited. I hope that the next time we talk, I have some great news for y'all, even better news. But I am looking forward to the work that we're doing. And thank you for always making this space available, Marilyn. Thank you for the work you're doing, Jamarr. And also thank you for your legacy and your continued work, Mr. Felder. I just honor your work and just stand. I just want to touch the hem of the garment. Thank y'all.
Brandon, I do want to say I'm glad you said that you're going to bring back some good news for us next time we gather. And I want people to let's not work against each other. Let's work with each other. This is just one of the things that we can do. I'm offering this space through the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. I welcome others also. And if y'all send me your information, I'll put it out on our social media and amplify it. And yes, I did use Amplify deliberately. I'll amplify your news because we cannot be jealous of each other. We need to put the pettiness and jealousy aside. And I know we're all not like that, but there are too many of us who are like that. And it has to end, because it's not about one moving forward, because one cannot move forward if we all do not move forward. So we need to work together. And I say all that just to say we need to work together. Jim.
Yes.
Our wise elder.
Well,
let's have some words from you.
We're going to hear more from us about the Gullah Geechee Leadership Institute, because we are going to be out setting fire on the people and institutions to do more than they are now doing. And we're going to make it plain, very simple, plain what they have to do. And I think if you do it that way, they'll catch on quicker and they'll be more willing to participate in what you're trying to do. So we ain't going out there with all kind of high, fascinating words and all of that. We're going to be basic, down to earth. And you will hear a lot from us now that the election's over. I have more time now, and I'm going to spend it in that direction.
Very good. Thank you, Jim, for those words. And as Jim said, the Gullah Geechee Leadership Institute is out there. That is the policy and issues arm of the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. And I do want to, we are focusing on issues, folks, and you need to go to our page and learn about the issues that we're focusing on. And that's why it was started. And it's very important. I started this because I knew it was important that we had to control the narrative when it comes to policies and issues and educate our people beyond the election cycle, because in between those election cycles, life happens. Life happens that impact us on a daily basis. That impacts our electric bills, our food bills, whether we buy prescriptions, whether we buy food. This is real stuff that impacts us, and we need to get educated on that. So go to GullahGeecheeLeadership.org, and it would be really nice if I put that website up. I had Empire Vote up. Now I got GullahGeecheeLeadership.org up there, folks. Go to all of our websites. Get educated about the issues. Get trained so you can work on these issues. Jamarr, Repower, and Jamarr Brown, give us some words. Because let us acknowledge that Jamarr Brown has been hot today. Jamarr been holding it in for what, two weeks, Jamarr? You've been holding it in?
I don't feel like I was hot. I feel like I was mild.
You were mild. You were vigorous. You were vigorous. But it's good. That was a compliment.
I'm very fervent in my beliefs. Let's call it.
There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go.
So, I mean, I echo and agree with everything everyone has said. Marilyn, I really like your point, especially about unity. And the thing I will add about the pettiness is, about egos, is how we just got to check our egos. Obviously, as we saw in this election and any election now to come, that there's so much at risk and at stake for so many people, right? And one of the things that someone asked me was how did I learn about civic engagement? And I remember, at least in my experience, learning about civic engagement through the church and through community and people being connected together. And I think sometimes we've lost that, right? Not saying that everybody has to go to church, right? But, you know, my family would take me to the school board meetings or the NAACP meetings, and you learned how to do this, right, along the way. And we don't do that anymore. We vote for ourselves and our family and our bank accounts, and we're not voting for the community anymore. And so we've got to have a balance of, yes, you have individual needs and passions and perspectives, but what about your neighbor? We want to make sure that we bring other people along. And so how are we balancing the narrative around our individual needs and wants and desires, but also with the collective needs and desires of folks in our community? We've got to vote for the community because it, like you all said, it's in numbers. The Bible teaches us that 2 or 3 have to gather. We know it's more 2 or 3. So that's a thing that I think that's important. The last piece I'll say is really about learning the civic engagement. I'm partnering with a dear friend of mine, was my former deputy on the campaign. And we're looking at how are we targeting universities to do training right now. You know, I'm always working on a project, right? So Amplify, I work on, you know, I just do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And one of the things is how are we targeting universities? So when people graduate college and go into graduate high school, and go into college, how are we training them when they're getting that more formalized education, not only to train toward what your field is, right? That if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor or, you know, whatever it is, that you also are getting trained outside of your field to also understand the whole community, both in your sector, but also where you live. And so those are really good opportunities. And like I mentioned earlier in the conversation, that there's 15 million new voters projected in the next presidential election. And this is our opportunity to make sure that we go back to that collective mind frame to really teach those folks and register those folks. Because I remember I registered to vote in my barbershop. They were like, you get your free haircut, you graduated, now here's your registration. And so but we need to get back to that and about that collective energy. So I hope that we really do that. And to the comment, unity is the new currency. And when we were unified and said, we're getting that man out of office, the currency is now we have a new president, right? And the yield on that. Now it's like what's the policy and what comes after that, but we've got to unify to get one result so that we can step to the next. And so
right on it. You're right on it. Okay.
You know, I can't wait till they were saying something about staying another half hour, but we don't want Brandon to get in trouble with Monica.
Yeah, I think Jim has to go too. So
I gotta go too. Yeah.
If y'all want to stay on, we can stay on. If you have to leave, you can leave. But I think we're gonna wrap it up, y'all, because we are actually 15 minutes after. We're gonna be 15 minutes after. So we'll give y'all 15 more minutes, which means we got about 6 more minutes. All right.
I gotta leave.
Thank you, Jim. Okay. Thank you, Jim. We knew you had to pop in. So we'll see you next time. Thank you, Jim.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Y'all, I do want to say this. Stay steadfast. Stay steadfast. In this time. Stay steady, stay steadfast. And one thing I do want to pull up, Jamarr, is
good.
Yeah, I want to talk about COVID-19. To end this, it's because it has disproportionately impacted the Black community, our community. And I want to say this as we gather, as we move towards the holidays, and COVID-19 is surging. Y'all, this is no joke. And I know as a community, we're aware of it because it has disproportionately impacted us. But I do want to say that we need to stay apart now so that when we gather together again, no one is missing. And I saw that on Facebook, and I've been repeating it because that is so true to who we are and what we need to do. We have to stay apart now so that when we gather together again, no one is missing. And I can count, I've lost a family member. I have a brother who is sick with COVID now. And I lost a father from cancer. And as I tell people, he died from cancer, but COVID killed him. Because of the isolation that we've been forced into, to stay at home, that mental impact on him, I really believe, helped open him to have that cancer come back, and eventually he died from it. So I just want to implore folks, it is a political thing. is why we're in this situation that we are in now. And that's why I'm bringing it up, because the current administration did not do and continues not to do what this country needs for us to get past this pandemic and get it under control. So as a community, we need to do what needs to be done, and that is stay home. But I also want to discuss, y'all, with this new administration coming in, they're going to make some hard choices. And we need to start preparing our people for those choices. Mm-hmm. And we need to consider that what may happen is we may have to have a real lockdown. Because we never really locked down this country at the beginning. We did not. People were still running around doing their things. As a matter of fact, it was the working class. Our lockdown basically was the working class serving the folks that could stay at home. So it truly was not a lockdown. So the politics of it, y'all, I just a few words to wrap up the show and all. What do you think is going to happen? What do we need to prepare our people for regarding this pandemic so we can get past this? And Brandon, I'll start with you. Any thoughts regarding that? We got to get our people ready. This is part of the education. Get our people ready for what's to come. Any thoughts, Brandon?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I believe in prayer. I believe that prayer works, but prayer isn't the only thing that's going to work. We can't pray this thing away. We have to do our part, wearing masks, staying socially distanced, washing our hands, doing the things to keep our immune systems up, and doing exactly what you said. Let's be a part right now so that we can come together later. As a community, we dismiss a lot of things, and it's because of a number of reasons. But we can't dismiss the true and present danger that COVID-19 presents on our community. So we have to absolutely do our part. I remember going to Alabama to meet with an organization that we're partnered with there, and just driving straight there and straight back, and seeing all the barbecues that were happening in the community that we were in, and just wide open, talking about what they were going to do at the club that weekend, right? We got to take this thing seriously, because otherwise it's going to become a serious situation, and we can't afford it much longer. So we just have to take it, do our part, and take it seriously.
Plus, we need y'all to be around so y'all can vote too. I'm just gonna tell y'all that. Dead people don't vote. I don't care what they say. So y'all need to stay alive so y'all can vote. Thank you, Brandon. Jamarr.
So one of the things I'll say, especially as we are going into the holidays, I mean, the holidays are already hard enough in terms of folks that have lost loved ones, throughout the year for, different reasons. And then you add this pandemic on top of it, where we're saying that maybe you can't have those large gatherings that you're used to at Thanksgiving or during the Christmas season or the holiday season, or New Year's even. And so I want to also respect that it's already hard, right, with grief and trauma and, all of that. And then we're also saying, in addition, stay home. But one of the things that is important is, we didn't elect the president and we don't elect governors for them to make all the decisions. There is somewhat of a role that we all have to play in this. It's not just Joe Biden's role. It's all of our roles, and how Joe Biden and his administration will coordinate with governors, will coordinate with local emergency agencies. And so there's a government response to this, but there's also a community response to this. And Joe Biden is responsible for what you do and don't do. And so that's the thing that we, got to understand. So if the order is to stay home, it's not Joe Biden's fault you did not stay home. Okay? So let's just call the thing a thing. So sometimes I understand some things like doctor's appointments and things that you may have to go to, but I just would encourage everyone listening or that you share with that please be wise, please follow the orders, because they're doing those orders based on science. They're doing those orders based on facts that they believe will get us out of there. Because the thing we have to remember about Joe Biden, he doesn't put his hand on the Bible and raise his hand until January 20th. So everything that we're talking about now, we still have to wait another 2.5 months for anything to move. And then we still need this vaccine. It's just a lot of pieces. And so the less that we can move around, where possible, the faster we can get out of this. And unfortunately, we did not have presidential or executive leadership that understood that at the beginning, because at the end of the day, there are a lot of people that sit in public office that just care about the economy and the dollar. And if your life is currency for that, then it will be in their case. Because if you can have, I mean, I'm just going to say this point blank. If 200 and at that time, 30-something thousand people, now 246,000 people have died under a pandemic, you deserve to lose that election. Nothing else. Like that alone, you should lose.
Mm-hmm.
Because that I mean, I don't even know how you walk around like with your head held up like that. That you allowed that many Americans to be at risk. We're at 10 million cases across the country, at 11 almost million cases. And so, you know, people think, oh, I'm just going to the club today. I'm all right. Oh, I'm just, you know, going to the beach today. I'm all right. You know, you should follow the CDC's orders, but as much during the holidays where more people are likely to be off, try to find things to do at home with your family. This is also a good time to reconnect with family and friends. And so I think that those are sometimes also good opportunities as well, because what you see is people showing up to state capitals and being against mask ordinances, and those mask ordinances could be the very thing that saved your life. You had a president of the United States that gathered thousands of people. You had a president of the United States that caught the thing himself. You're supposed to be leading us out of it. So the president of the United States, I'm just going to say this too, because we're at the end of the show. If the president of the United States walked around and caught it, one, you can't, and two, you need to sit down.
That's right, Jamarr, and I totally agree with you. And actually, that's a good way to end this show, because we want to show the love to our people. And this is about, it is political. It is political. And I believe Brittany, too, posted it. Is when it got political is when it got deadly. And that is on point. It is on point. So I'm glad that you said what you said, Jamarr, because it needs to be said. We are at a point in our lives. We are at a point in this inflection in society, but we have to be blunt and truthful with people so we can move forward. Right. Now is not the time to beat around the bush. People are literally dying. And I want to, yeah, go ahead.
As I'm saying that as we speak right now, that we've had this hour and a half, however long, conversation. How many people have died from COVID-19 because they either exposed themselves or someone else was not responsible and exposed them? I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can walk outside and get COVID. I mean, it's right. That simple, because it's an airborne virus.
That's right.
People don't understand that. So when you're doing these large gatherings and things that are sometimes unnecessary, because there's a difference between I want to do this thing and then there's necessary that I do this thing. And some things are necessary. And,
that's right.
You know, you do what you need to do, mask up and all of that. But some things I have watched on social media, I'm like, this is just unnecessary. Y'all just doing it just to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And now you're exposing people, because if someone shows up to that event or that activity and they are carrying it, because what we know is it takes a few days for you to even really be able to test it to see if you're positive or negative, right? And so if you've been exposed to it and then now you've come to another group of people and you've exposed them, now you've exposed other people and you didn't even know you carried it. Anybody could be carrying it. You don't.
That's right.
And so
with
so much uncertainty, it's incumbent upon us to be more proactive in our lives when you have seen the president of the United States put his own life at risk. That if someone like that, who's supposed to be the most powerful person in the world, will put his own life and the people who work for him, his son got it, his wife, he put his own people at risk, he will put you at risk. And we've got to have that proactive understanding, because I'm not putting my life in Donald Trump's hands.
That's right. And we proved that by voting on November 3rd and voting him out of office. So what we're going to end this, folks, with, you need to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Absolutely.
You need to stay yourself at home. You need to stay apart from each other so that when we come back together, no one is missing. Jamarr, it has always been a pleasure.
Absolutely. This is fun.
I know we do talk to each other between Thursday Sundays.
And then everything just comes out on the show. So I feel like now we have to end up adding like a little bit of time, because, you know, as we saw, we get going.
Yeah, we get going, and we're so happy that y'all joined us today. Y'all wanted us to go longer. We tried to watch our times and everything. As you see, Jim had to hop on and off, and Brandon had to leave also. And Thomas Dixon, thank you for sharing that. One person in America has died every minute since this broadcast began. That is true. And I think that's what Jamarr was looking for too. That statistic. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Reverend Dixon, for posting that for us. Y'all, look here. Y'all be safe, get educated, get activated, get motivated to change this system, because we can do it. We can do it. It's going to take an investment of our time, money, and resources, but it can be done. And we come together. We gather together every third Sunday here at a gathering place hosted by the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. See how I did that?
Come on in.
So we can be part of the solution. And y'all, we always make sure that we have a good time when we come together too. This is not to be sad about this or mad, but it's to just share the knowledge that we've been gifted. This is a gift that we have, y'all, to share with us. And I think every single one of us on this show, when we come together, my co-host every third Sunday, that we know that this is a gift that we have been given to share with everyone. Thank you, Thomas Dixon. We think you are amazing also for all that you do. And we think our viewing audience that you are also amazing. Jamarr, it's been good. Yeah. Always good to see you. And we'll see you next month on the third Sunday.
That's right. All right. Bye, y'all.
Keep doing good.
Stay safe out there, everybody.
We will. Thank you. And everyone, I want to remind you that every Wednesday and Sunday at 4 o'clock, we have a gathering place, Facebook Live and YouTube Live. You are always welcome back to join us. We always have a good time sharing the knowledge that we have. And once again, I want to say thank you. Be safe out there. Enjoy the Thanksgiving holiday. Enjoy the Christmas holiday. But make sure this year, unfortunately, we have to do it apart physically. But when we come back together, we don't want anyone missing. Thank you, folks. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We're out.